Welcome back to a new episode of DV. This week, we're taking you on an exploration of Japanese culture from different perspectives. The F&B industry in Hong Kong has so much to offer, but there is one particular cuisine that stands out. Digging deep into the history of sake, Veronica chats with a special guest who earned a prestigious distinction in his journey into Japanese culture. But first, Des takes us to a Meiji Restoration period-inspired establishment to see what the true value of hospitality is and means.
There are more restaurants in Hong Kong than you can shake a stick at. In a highly competitive F&B environment, restaurants have to sell different things. Some will concentrate on fresh seasonal ingredients, others will sell presentation, and others, decor and design. Now, I think the success of a restaurant really hinges on a combination of those things to create an overall dining experience. It's not hard to find new restaurants to try in Hong Kong. A new one pops up every single day. So what I want to ask you is, what attracts you to a dining experience? And more importantly, what will make you want to come back for more?
I'm sure there are plenty of restaurants that want the answer to that question, Des. There are so many elements to consider. Where do you even begin?
What does hospitality mean to you, and what's the hospitality scene like here in Hong Kong?
Hospitality means to me is about the entire customer journey as soon as he or she walks in the door to leaving the restaurant. Please, Desmond.
Thank you.
I think in a very simple way, it's about food and also service. Food-wise, Hong Kong probably has some of the best in the world.
Sure.
But when it comes to customer service, I think there still can be a lot more training and improvements. So this place, we are doing a lot more about Japanese hospitality. It's about our managers, our staff, how do they go about in conversing with the guest. So some of the little details would include how to go about in bowing, say thank you. For example, in Japan, when it comes to talking with guests, they cannot be looked down upon to the guests. It has to be at the same eye level or below. So what that means is that a lot of our staff, when they talk to the guests, they got to be kneeling down and talking to them.
Tell us more about the restaurant itself and the overall concept of this place, because walking around, it's unlike anything I've seen before.
Yeah. So when I first visited this location, I was immediately very impressed by its potential, mainly with the history and the heritage feel of the building, to the exposed brick walls, to also the layouts of having 6 interconnected rooms. And it reminds me of some of these speakeasy exclusive private clubs in New York. So what we ended up decided to do was to put in 3 different concepts into this one location. And they are the coffee and tea bar, and then our Western Japanese influenced cuisine, as well as a bar that focuses on soju-based cocktails, and also music being played on vinyl records. In terms of the decor and the design, we ultimately used 3 different periods of Japan to be included into the space. So besides the Meiji period, there's also the Taisho period, which followed after Meiji, and also the Showa period, which were basically from the 30s until the 90s. Having a restaurant inside a heritage building is that we can try to do as little as possible and still make it a very warm and environment. The restaurant is trying to pay homage to the Meiji period of Japan. It was a very interesting time in Japan, a period of growth and modernization, where a lot of Western influences, cultures, and lifestyle were introduced to Japan during that time. So it included coffee from the Dutch in the early 1800s to cocktails from America, as well as various different dishes such as hamburg and omelets from Western Europe. The hamburg was something that actually came from Germany. Of course, it made popular in the US, but it was something that also stuck into a lot of Japanese, and it became increasingly popular during the 60s and the 70s in Japan with these kissaten, kind of old school coffee shops in Japan. But it did arrive in Japan back in the late 1800s.
Well, and like with so many things in Japan, what I like about Hamburg steak is it's the Japanese's own spin on the food. food,
Correct.
right? Hamburg steak doesn't taste anything like a hamburger in the US.
Yes, we have a chef from Japan who runs our kitchen, and he's the one who's directly responsible for a lot of our food development, recipes. And the beauty with him is that actually all the food here, in terms, focus is really also on the sauces. And all the sauces we make from scratch on a daily basis.
Wow.
And some of these demi-glaze sauce, it may take actually over 8 hours to make.
Wow. This building we're in, of course, is well known to a lot of people in Hong Kong. Many people have been here before. For those coming to this restaurant, what would you like them to get out of it?
I think other than food, it's about the entire customer experience of as soon as they walk in to when they leave. And hopefully when they leave, they get a sense of the old history of Japan and get to experience that.
My chat with Teddy has given me a better idea of the overall concept of this place, the food that's served, as well as what they're trying to go after in terms of service. So now we're going to move from the Meiji period inspired dining room to the Taisho period bar. It's time for some cocktails and music. Chandrakan,
Hi,
how are you?
very good. How are you doing?
Good to see you.
Basically, this is a Sochu cocktail and music lounge. And if you look back in terms of what happened during the Meiji Transformation era, there was a lot of openness to the Western world.
Sure.
And you had a lot of things coming into Japan,
Yep.
including, for example, a lot of Western culture, for example, music, how they dressed, how they ate, how they drank. And if you look at Sochu itself as a spirit from Japan, it's got a long history back to 400, 500 years ago. But it has never been really understood outside Japan as much. And if you look at the popularity of Sochu versus things like sake, it's actually a lot more consumed within Japan. But people outside Japan know less of Sochu. Sake is, if you think of a fermented sort of drink or a brewed drink, like wine.
Yep.
Whereas Sochu is a distilled spirit,
Okay.
like whiskey.
Okay. Or gin.
Or gin,
Yep.
or vodka. Sochu is a lot more recent relative to sake, and it grew out of more as a blue-collar drink. And if you look at the development of both the sort of drinks, Sochu has been generally a lot more rough in terms of the aroma and the flavor back in those days. So obviously for a Western palate or overseas, it's easier to accept a sake. However, a lot of changes have happened in the last decade or so in the Sochu production. So that has transformed how Sochu is made, how Sochu is presented to the outside world, a lot of changes in terms of how it is used in cocktails. So that is now gradually bringing Sochu to the forefront. So the way we view this place is, this is like paying sort of homage to Sochu as a spirit. So you have the option of drinking Sochu by itself. You have the option of drinking Sochu in a highball, which is a very simple sort of cocktail.
Yep.
Or there are more elaborate cocktails that we basically would have on the menu. So you can drink Sochu in any of these three sort of ways. Our goal is to be able to make Sochu broadly acceptable.
Yep.
Our passion for Sochu, combined with the fact that we have a great team, plus the venue, plus the sort of music, it kind of all has to come together. Guests may or may not understand or recognize Sochu, but what they take away after they leave from here is that they had a great time.
Leanne, tell me about the cafe culture in Japan and how it's reflected here in this space.
呢個冰滴咖啡咧，都係 inspired by 明治時期嘅。
A lot of the elements here are inspired by the Meiji period, including this machine here.
喺荷蘭度發明嘅，
Oh.
喺日本嘅時候咧就好受歡迎，咁都改咗名做京都咖啡。
Oh, I see. Interesting. So this is a ice trip coffee machine, and it was invented by the Dutch. And they brought it over during the Meiji period, and it became so popular that it took on the name of Kyoto coffee. Many of us have had drip coffee before, but drip tea we don't see as much in Hong Kong.
佢呈現到嘅茶咧個香味同埋個甜度咧都會唔同啲。
By doing the drip process through tea, it enhances and brings out different flavors and aromas in the tea. For a patron who comes to visit you here, and whether they're sitting in the tatami mats behind us or here at the coffee bar, what do you hope they take away from their experience?
咁個榻榻米啦，同埋一個 bar counter 咧，都想我哋嘅 barista 同埋 customer 有一個好好嘅交流啊 interaction。
So you're hoping that the customer takes away an exclusive experience, whether it's from the Meiji period-inspired architecture and design, or the customer experience where they have close interaction with you. The Meiji Restoration was partly about innovation in science and technology, adoption of Western culture, and generally new ways of doing things. Being here today made me feel like I've traveled back in time to period Japan. It's also reminded me of something that I've always known and appreciated: Japanese-style service. At the top of this segment, I posed a question to all of you. What would make you a repeat customer at a restaurant? Well, for me, it'd definitely be a customer service experience based on impeccable hospitality. The kind of hospitality that comes from anticipating clients' needs, maybe even before they know it, and one that comes from the heart.
I'm so fascinated with Japanese culture. In fact, did you know that back in the Edo period, Japan closed its borders for 214 years? That's when they developed their rich culture. And out came Japanese ceramics, Japanese flower arrangement, Japanese food, and sake. Hey, speaking of sake, we're going to meet a modern samurai right now who's going to teach me all about the history of sake. Let's go. Hi, Elliot. You're our sake samurai. Nice to meet you.
So glad to be here. Well, I mean, I'm always here, so yeah, I'm glad you're here.
A lot of us are very interested in sake, but we never know enough about it. What is a sake samurai? I've never heard of that. Can you explain that? And what is your passion towards sake?
Well, first of all, I love Japanese culture from being a child, playing video games, reading manga. We had an exchange student stay with us. And then later on, as I started to get more involved in food culture, I studied to become a sommelier. And then I moved to Hong Kong, and I had a really kind of sudden opportunity to grow a passion for sake. So after working in a restaurant, developing the beverage programs there and focusing on sake, I had an opportunity to write a book.
Oh.
I wrote this book about sake, and thankfully it got great recognition from the community and the sake industry. And at that point, I was chosen by a panel, the Japan National Brewers Association Junior
That's not
Council.
easy to get into. There's about only like 100 people for this program, right?
They have to get together every year and they have to vote on who they think could be a sake samurai. It was a huge honor. And I take it very seriously. We went to 75 breweries in 19 days, all the way from Okinawa to Hokkaido. And you know, I got to choose all the breweries. I did the whole travel itinerary. My spiritual homeland for sake is a small town called Akashi.
Oh.
Akashi is in Hyogo Prefecture. So Hyogo is kind of next to, just a little bit to the west of Kyoto and heading towards Osaka. Hyogo is where some of the best Yamada Nishiki rice comes from, and that's like me telling you if it's wine, it's where the best Cabernet Sauvignon comes from. So it's a prized rice variety, and it's where the best rice is coming from.
The rice really makes a difference, right?
Absolutely. The original kind of development of sake culture all started from this communal chewing and spitting out of rice into this pot that would eventually ferment and react with the different bacteria and mold in the air, which have now all been kind of modernized and broken down into the key ingredients of sake, which are koji mold and yeast. Rice is critical in sake production, but the truth is that a lot of the work of making sake taste how it does happens in the brewery. So there's a lot of things that the sake maker can do depending on what style of sake they want to make. So yes, rice is important, but it's what you do with the rice, and then how you implement the other key ingredients of koji mold and yeast. the main ingredients for sake outside of water. What are you going to do with those once you've got them all together? And that will define how your sake is going to taste.
So let's talk about the history of sake more. So back then you said it used to be only drinks for the royals, right?
Yeah.
And now how did it transit towards commoners?
Well, it was royals and for religious ceremonies. So much like beer production and wine with their role in history, it was always originally like a religious connotation, or it would be made by the church or by the shrine or by the monks. And sake has a very similar history in that respect. Eventually, the production of sake was passed down to more cottage industries, artisans, farmers, people that started to make sake for more than just royalty and for religious, but they started to enjoy it their own. So the start of the sake season is October 1st officially. That's World Sake Day. Technically, people make sake all year round, but a lot of that historical reference that I'm talking about before still resonates today because a lot of the breweries are centuries-old breweries. They've owned their land for just as long, and they don't necessarily put in modern refrigeration. So the reason that the sake season starts in October 1st is because that's kind of the beginning of winter. And in order for your sake to have a long, healthy fermentation, you need cold temperatures.
So Elliot, how far has sake come from back then to the present?
If you consider that over 2,000-year history and starting in China, and look at where we are today, certain things such as the principle and the philosophy of making sake have really not changed. There have been some modern innovations, but a lot of the structure and the way that people approach sake making still calls on teachings that are from before the 19th century.
And now you can drink sake anytime you want,
anytime,
right?
anywhere.
Back then it wasn't like that.
Absolutely.
Is the Hong Kong people more receptive to a certain type of sake?
Absolutely, but Hong Kong people should be proud because we are the largest market for sake in the world right now. For me, that makes me proud because I've been hustling here for 10 years trying to get people to enjoy sake. But one of the challenges is that people have a preconceived notion about what sake they should be drinking. A great example is Junmai Daiginjo. This is a category that is really important in the sake world. Yeah. I think it's worth showing you because these characters here, it's something that really kind of shows quality and shows as being premium and pure. But the problem is that if you buy a sake that doesn't have this character of pure, that doesn't have this quality of premium and processing, if these two characters are gone, you're going to think you're buying an inferior product, right?
Yes.
Because it's not there. Oh, it's not pure. It's not extra, right? But does that mean it's not as good? Well, the fact is, no. It just is telling you that they didn't go through the same processing methods to make the same sake, but the flavor, the components, and the balance, and all of the work that went into making the sake is still there.
Wow, this looks delicious.
Yeah.
Thank you. ありがとうございます.
Right here, katsusando, classic staple of Japanese food culture. This is something that we had to have here. This is an ascolana. Ascolana is something from Tuscany, right? And it's just ground beef, fried, and then we kind of dress it up a little bit with some caviar on top to bring that salty, briny character. This is caviar toast with finger lime and also with a nori brioche that our Italian chef bakes in-house.
Because usually when we have sake, it goes with traditional Japanese food or sushi.
Yeah.
So is there a reason why you chose to pair this with Italian food?
Why do we have to have sake with sushi and Japanese food if we can have pizza in Okinawa and we can have a bottle of wine with our sushi? There's no rules. Here we make food for the sake, and that's kind of the beauty.
I noticed that behind you there's a lot of different cups.
Yeah. Traditionally, people were drinking out of masu. They were drinking out of the ochoko, the ceramics, the small little cups. Sake, one thing for sure, is that it's meant to be shared. It's meant to be a communal drink, and that's why the cups are so small. You can kind of keep pouring, enjoying. There's a social mechanism to the enjoyment of sake that supersedes kind of the history or the production methods.
How would you pair the sake with the main course?
Usually, at the later part of the meal, the flavors are more rich and more heavy. So the type of sake that we're going to recommend is the sake that's going to be more rich and more heavy. Usually something in the junmai category, could be a yamahai, which is a certain style that has a lot of umami and acid and kind of more funky flavors. That's kind of good later on. But then at the beginning of the meal, that's when we're having our vegetables, our raw dishes, sashimi kind of stuff. And that's where we bust out the junmai daiginjo for those more delicate, lighter, and aromatic styles of sake. And, you know, to bring it all full circle, talking about hot sake, which, you know, like I'm saying could be warm sake, room temperature sake, body temperature sake. You know, using those different temperatures, usually we'll do something a little bit more kind of cold and crisp to heighten that sense of acidity at the beginning, focusing on those more aromatic and delicate junmai daiginjo. And then we'll work our way up, and once we hit the katsusando equivalent of the main part of the meal, that's when you get those kind of more warmer sake that can really open up the richness and bond with the flavors that are inside the food. The flavors of sake and the actual chemical makeup of sake allows for us to be a little bit more flexible with the flavors that we're pairing.
When you go into a fine dining restaurant, the food and wine pairing is already set. If you order fish, it's going to pair with a white wine, never red. But after talking to Elliot and knowing the history of sake, it opened my eyes to realize that sake is so versatile. It's so versatile, you can pair it with anything you like, and traditionally speaking, it has a social element to it. So it makes it much more easier to appreciate.